When you think about ethics, especially when you think about absolutist ethics, you think about Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant has by far the most interesting, most sophisticated, most complete grasp of what absolute ethics should look like. He begins with a single precept, one that wouldn't occur to most of us. The one thing that is good in and of itself is a good will. Where does goodness come from? Goodness is a quality of actions. Moral goodness is the quality produced when someone is doing the right thing. So it is that will, that good will, that is the source of all moral good in the world. What makes something good? It came from a good will. A good will makes good things happen. Okay. What do wills do? Well, wills push us into the world and through the world. A good will, of course, is one that pushes us rightly, goodly, the way we should be pushed. The good will, the bad will, the in-between will, all issue orders, directives. Kant preferred the term imperatives. Now, imperatives, in normal conversation, having nothing to do with Kant in particular, imperatives come in two kinds. One are the kinds of rules that you have to follow because of certain conditions. If you think I'm sexy and you want my body, come on, baby, let me know. I don't have to let you know if you don't think I'm sexy. See, there's a condition that has to be met in order for you to do this thing. People who want to do well in a class should study. You don't want to do well, you don't have to study. That's a conditional imperative, an imperative that you only have to perform if you meet a certain condition. But there are other kinds of imperatives, imperatives that cover everyone and everything of a certain kind. The category, it fits a whole category at once. It's a categorical imperative. It doesn't require any conditions be met. It is in and of itself the whole category. And these categorical imperatives are what a good will issues. Now, to be fair to Kant, it's not that you can't have moral conditional imperatives, but they're going to be moral because how they fit back to a categorical imperative. We're going to see ultimately that there are perfect duties that we have and there are imperfect duties that we have. There are ones out of categorical imperatives and ones out of categorical imperatives. All I'm worried about today are those defining terms, those categorical imperatives. Now, Kant was aware that this concept was not simple. A good will is one that wills something. Everybody, every time is true. Everybody would follow, meets every possible condition imaginable. That's what a good will does. One way of describing that goodwill is that it will cause you to act in such a way that the maxim of that action can be made universal law. Okay, now let's unpack that. We will be made to act because, again, we're looking at actions. We're not worried about your whole character. We're not worried about your whole history. We're worried about this action here. Now, Kant believes that as you understand how the categorical imperative works You can just give yourself over to the imperative. It all becomes just as habitual as it is for the utilitarian or the Aristotelian or any other of the ethical theories that you may encounter. Again, our goal is to be good, not to be standing around. And so Kant says, here's a good will. Here's a description of one that you know is good. It is one that causes you to act in such a way that the maxim, that the rule, that the principle we would all derive from that action could be made universal law. Now, when we're talking about universal law here, we're not talking about the physical possibility of something. We're talking the logical possibility of something. Because we don't know all the physical characteristics of the universe, but we do know the logical characteristic. Logic, for Kant at least, is universal. Fits everywhere, every condition, every situation. So, that universal law is a statement of logical consistency. So, the maxim you create by the action that you do is logically consistent across all space and time. My favorite example, and I think the easiest one to follow here, is lying. There is one thing you have to know in order to tell a lie. Now, maybe that's not quite right. Yeah, I think it is right. There's one thing you have to know to tell a lie. And that is the truth. Now, if you tell somebody something and you believe it to be true, but it isn't, that's just being wrong. You might tell somebody something that you believe to be wrong with the intention of getting them to believe it. But that isn't really a lie, because you could be wrong about it being wrong. You could be wrong, and then you're just wrong. Likewise, if I tell something maliciously and it turns out to be true, then I haven't lied either. So the only time I can be genuinely said to have told a lie is when I know the truth. Now, let's say I tell a lie. I am acting always. Whenever if I'm saying it's moral, then I am acting in such a way that the maximum of my action is universal law. So when I tell a lie, I'm saying everyone should tell lies. And therefore we all tell lies. Now what happens if everybody lies all the time? Well, shortly, nobody knows the truth. But if nobody knows the truth, then nobody can lie. And this then is why lying cannot be a universal law. It leads to a contradiction. It says we must all lie, and then it makes it impossible for us to lie. Whereas telling the truth, we may not always like telling the truth. We may not always like hearing the truth. But telling the truth can logically be done all the time. Now, of course, that assumes you know the truth, but we've already agreed. If you don't know the truth, you're wrong. You're not lying, you're wrong. I may believe it to be true, but I'm just wrong. I may believe it to be false, but basically I'm just wrong because I don't know. And it's only when I know that I can lie. But when I lie, The ability to know the truth disappears. And so truth-telling all the time, lying, self-contradictory. All right. He said, okay, maybe you don't get that. Maybe that's a little too much for you. Let me try this version of it. He says, when you act, treat others as ends in themselves and not means only. Now, what does that mean? All of us have our goals in life. Everybody is going somewhere. Everyone has some end, some goal, some final spot they're trying to reach. Now, how we get there is via the means. Now, Kant is not foolish enough to say we don't treat people as means some of the time. We have to treat people as means some of the time. As you listen to me talk, you're treating me as a means to learn something. We check out at the cash register in the grocery store, and we treat the cashier as a means to purchase the goods we want to eat. We use people as means all the time. Kant's point is not means only. Be aware that this is a person too, and as such has their own goals. They are ends in themselves. They are going a place all their own. They are as full of the sort of thing we should respect and dignify as we are ourselves. So if I lie to you, I am treating you as an ends? No. Because I have taken from you the ability to make certain judgments, make certain choices that, I can't read your mind. I don't know what you need to know in order to achieve the ends you want. You, the end you are, the place you're going, the thing that you're producing in the world, you may need to know exactly what I'm lying about. So I'm not treating you as an end in yourself. Instead, I have a reason I'm lying. Maybe it makes it funny for me to lie. Maybe I want to keep something from you. Doesn't matter. Whenever I'm lying to you, I'm treating you as a means to my goals. And that's wrong. I am to treat you as a ends also. Yes, I treat you as a means. But when I treat you as that means, I cannot rob you of your goals. I cannot keep you from your desires, your principles, where you're headed to. If I do that, then I am treating you as a means only. Okay. One last version of it. He says, okay, hopefully this whole thing is taking shape for you. Now, bear in mind, as I've illustrated there with those two examples, these are not intended to be different kinds of things. These aren't different sorts of imperatives. They are complementary versions of the good. There is a debate in the literature about whether it is one categorical imperative stated three different ways, or whether there are three different categorical imperatives. You will even hear it argued there are four categorical imperatives. This is a beginning lecture in this material. If you want to know more, ask. I will give you more. But usually it's understood that he has three categorical formulations of one imperative. And the last one, in some regards, sounds the most familiar. Act so that you are both sovereign and subject of the kingdom of ends. Okay, the kingdom of ends. That's all of us who are able to have goals, who have moral outcomes in our world. We're the people who are making decisions, moving forward, pursuing our ideals, pursuing our reality. We are making the world into something new and different and better. We're ends in ourselves. We are the kingdom of ends. Democracy is loose in the world, but he wants to call it the kingdom of ends for a very specific reason, because we are to be both sovereign and subject. Sovereign, nobody ever seems to mind. We all want to make the rules. So we're supposed to make the rules. We are the ruler of the kingdom of ends. However, we are also the subject of the kingdom of ends. Whatever rules we make for everybody else as the sovereign, we must also follow as the subject. If I say we must respect the king, well, you're all the king. So you all must be respected. And I am the subject. I have to follow that rule as well. I don't get to say, oh, I'm the king. No. We are all the king. We are all the subject. So that when we make these rules, they apply to all of us in the same way, to the same extent. What Kant gives us here is a way of justifying some absolute rules. He does not appeal to anything except logic, to reason. He says, here is the world. The world has a shape. The world has a pattern. We call that pattern logic. And we say if you behave logically and logically consistently, then these outcomes, good outcomes, moral outcomes. Why are they good and moral? They are the product of a good will, a will that acts in a way that the categorical imperative can describe. One last time. 3 formulations. Act so that the maxim of your action can be considered universal law. 2, treat everyone as ends in themselves, not as means only. And lastly, you are both sovereign and subject of the kingdom of ends. We've seen, well, I didn't illustrate really that last one in terms of the lie. Let me illustrate that in terms of the lie. But in lying, I am preventing you from achieving ends. And we're all part of the kingdom of ends. So lying won't work. Can't let myself off the hook about lying even. Everybody has to tell the truth. Lying never works. Lying's never any good. Because again, who wants to be lied to? Well, I know. Does this pair of pants make my butt look too big? Do you really want to lie there? If you really want to lie there, don't ask the question. Everybody wants the truth. The truth is how we get to our goals, how we get to our ends, how we realize ourselves. The truth will set you free. Now, with these principles in mind, we can go back, look at our formulations and see how they interrelate. And as I just showed there, if I'm acting so that the maxim of my action is universal law, that's the same as when the sovereign lays down the rules for the kingdom of ends. That we all have to follow that rule follows because, after all, logic has to be followed by everybody exactly the same way. So I am both sovereign and subject because I am acting so that my maxim is universal law. I'm acting so that my maxim is universal law. Therefore, I have to treat everything the same with an eye toward that universal law, that goodwill. If I'm treating everybody that way, then I am treating people as ends in themselves, not as means only. And again, let's emphasize, not as means only. It's not that I can't treat you as a means. I have to treat you as a means. But I don't have to treat you as a means only. I can treat you as a person who is a member of the kingdom of ends, who is going to the same kind of places I'm going to, who has the same needs for truth and promise keeping and so much more. Kant's ethics work. The question is, do we always like the outcomes of Kant's ethics? We're going to talk about one important challenge in his lifetime, and we're going to talk about the relationship that's suggested between the golden rule and the categorical imperative. But that's going to be part 2. For now, think about what we just talked about, and you keep on talking philosophy.